Hi, this is Bill Hartzer, and this is the Digital Marketing Podcast with Bill Hartzer, the Digital Marketing with Bill Hartzer podcast. And today is May 21st, 2020, and I have the pleasure of having my good friend Joe Hall, who is a technical SEO and uh, from Hall Analysis. Welcome, Joe. Let's talk a little bit about yourself and tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into the SEO industry.
Hey, thanks a lot, Bill, for having me on your podcast. Well, my name is Joe Hall. I am a independent SEO consultant. I've been doing SEO for about 10 years now. Well,
Okay.
actually, maybe a little longer than 10 years, but I got into SEO originally because I was a web developer and a lot of my clients were SEOs. And so I learned SEO from a technical perspective. And I like to tell people that I was doing technical SEO before technical SEO was even a thing.
Sure.
And so I've really just continued with that. And I've worked at two different agencies over the last 10 years.
Okay.
But a majority of my time I've been working independently for lots of different types of clients and working alongside lots of different types of people. So that's basically about me. Really, that's my background.
Sure. So when we define technical SEO, my definition of technical SEO is essentially a lot of it is not necessarily just the content or anything, but it involves a lot more. For example, things like that are more on the server level or in the code and looking at the code, and so you have to, to be able to at least be a technical SEO, you have to be able to understand the code and and actually be able to look at the page source and understand what it all means. And ideally, the more technical you can get with more with web development and coding and so forth, those are technically, can really help you be a technical SEO. um, I wanted to ask you, specifically, I guess one of the things that a lot of us, are are optimizing for, or is essentially our pages to load faster, and we
Mm-hmm.
call that page load speed.
Uh,
So what are some of the basic things that somebody trying to get our, if you're trying to get your website to load faster, or our pages to load faster, we understand the search engines, but mainly Google has have told us, really, and they provide these tools that say, okay, well, if your page loads faster, it's a better user experience. And I've actually seen an e-commerce site make their page load faster, and Google ended up sending more traffic. So what are some of the basic things, even for somebody who's not very technical, like you or I can do? What would we look at first, or where do we start?
well, I think that it's good to think when you think about page speed. If you want to think about it in a very simple way, you would want to think that there is really uh, uh, three main components of
Okay.
page speed. Um, and that is how fast is your server responding? That's the first thing.
Sure.
The second thing is how fast are uh, your JavaScript and CSS, and how are not only how fast they're responding, but how they're operating on the page. So, for example, uh, sometimes certain parts of the HTML or parts of the page require JavaScript or require
Okay.
CSS, and
Yep.
if the CSS or JavaScript take a long time to load, then those parts of the page may not show up either until they're done loading. So there's that, and then there's also the last part would be your images, your image assets. So those are kind of three main components that you want to focus on. And if you don't know very much about any of those things, then there are some basic things you can do. Like, for example, to increase the server speed, you can pay attention to things like caching. So if you
Okay.
have a good caching plugin to use, or if you can use something like Cloudflare, like a content delivery network like Cloudflare, or other things, those can be beneficial. And those are things, caching is the kind of thing that you can easily get help with from your web hosting company. So if you're working with a web hosting company for your website,
Mhm.
and you don't really know anything about caching, you can send them a support ticket and say, hey, how can I implement caching on my website? And they might even have some tools built into their hosting environment that you don't know about that they can turn on or the flip of a switch on
Sure.
the back end to implement caching. So that's one thing. And then to optimize JavaScript and CSS, if you're using something like WordPress, there are plugins available that can help you optimize those things.
Yep.
But because uh, every WordPress or every design, whether it's WordPress or another CMS, every website design is built differently. Like, that means that the JavaScript and CSS will be differently for every website. So in some cases,
Sure.
it may be beneficial to work with someone that really knows what they're doing, to help you make your JavaScript or CSS load faster, or at least can tell you if it's a problem. It may not even be a problem. And then with your images, a good thing to do is there's some really great WordPress plugins out there that can minimize the size of your images and
Sure.
can optimize future images that are being loaded. There's also some really good articles online if you just type in, to Google, like, tips for optimizing images for the web.
Hmm.
Uh, Especially if you use for the web, images for the web. Those articles can give you some good best practices, basically like what types of image formats to use. Usually things like SVGs and PNGs are usually lighter weight than, say, like a JPG or a GIF. So using things like that and learning basic image optimization for the web is a good thing for that. Those are kind of like the basics of it. Learning those three areas can really help you out. But also there's a lot of other things that you can be doing, and really it depends on your site heavily, because every website is kind of built differently, and some websites will have things like, for example, WordPress. Some WordPress themes have things built into them that make them faster than others, and some
Hmm.
WordPress themes have been built kind of haphazardly without a whole lot of
Sure.
attention to speed. So it really depends on your site, and one of the things that you can do to check is to use a speed reporting tool available. There's a lot of free ones out there. Google has a great one called the Page Speed Insights tool, and you can get a good speed score for both mobile and desktop versions of your website, and get a good sense of how your site is doing in regards to speed, and also get some good recommendations on how to fix any problems that might be there within those tools. So that's a good place to look, and that's a good place to start, I would say. You know.
Sure, definitely. So I typically, without even running those tools, I typically with a specifically, if we're talking WordPress, I certainly would do an image plugin because that's kind of, those that's kind of a one-time thing, have it go through and optimize all your images and so forth, and then obviously, as you create more pages or create more blog posts and insert more images, you want to keep up with those. That typically, a lot. What happens is typically, I have found is it we'll use our iPhone or our Samsung Galaxy to take a really good looking photo, but then we send it to ourselves and we put it on the blog post. Well, that's typically several meg in size. So in theory, then you have to load that even though the photos looks really good, it has to load on your web page, and that can certainly take some time increase the time that it takes to load the page, thus page load speed. So and then so images are good to deal with first, and then I do like to go like your recommendation about going things like the Google Page Speed Insights tool. I know webpagetest.org. I know GT Metrics also has a site. And so you can run those, and essentially those then give you some information about what may be the issues, whether it's whether it's caching and or whether it's you still have an image problem or and so forth, or if it's they can talk about they might mention minifying JavaScript and the and the CSS and the code. Uh, and if you're not really that technical, I probably recommend using something like Cloudflare. And Cloudflare is actually essentially a filter. And when we talk about caching, there's the way caching works essentially is the fact that WordPress has a database and it has the page, and every time a page, a visitor goes to your site, it has to actually do all the lookups and run the code on your site. And if you cache the page, you're making a copy of it, and it doesn't have to actually hit the database and load. And so in that case, Cloudflare acts as a cache, helps you cache pages, so that when somebody comes to the page, they then it says, okay, well, we already have a copy of it, here's the copy of it, and then they load that, and so that those couple things can help. Then we get, but if you really get into the technical part of it, things like things that I need to look at a little bit more into is render blocking and in those sub issues. Can you kind of explain what one of the issues is not just caching or images, but render blocking? What does that actually mean?
So render blocking is essentially where you will have like JavaScript or CSS that is required for a part of the page to work.
Okay.
And if that page, like if those pieces, like the JavaScript or CSS,
Mhm.
uh, isn't loaded, because JavaScript and CSS usually is an independent file. Usually you load
Sure.
those through a JavaScript file or a CSS file, and so if those two files are taking a while to load, um, but the code on them is required to show parts of the page, then that means that part of the page is blocked from being visible or blocked from the user seeing it because that the code that's required to run it is not visible, right? So the
Sure.
idea is that what you want to do is, what you can do to fix that is you can either make sure that those assets, the JavaScript or the CSS, loads quickly. That's one way to do it.
Mhm.
But a really easy way to do it is to provide both of those assets inline. which means basically instead of calling a separate file to load the
Yep.
JavaScript or the CSS, you
Sure.
just load that JavaScript, you know, in within the HTML. Like it's a chunk of JavaScript just embedded in HTML, or a chunk
Okay.
of the CSS embedded into the HTML. And so
Sure.
as soon as the HTML is loaded, that other piece of code, the JavaScript and CSS, that's loaded instantly along with the HTML. So there's no
Okay.
render blocking then, because then everything is loaded all at the same time. That's a really good way to fix that problem. But sometimes that's not possible just based on the way the site is structured or the way that a site is built. And in that case, you have to kind of uh, be strategic with the way you fix those problems. Um, but that's basically what that is, and that tends to be that's a really good question, Bill, because that tends to be something that comes up a lot for people. Render
Yep.
blocking JavaScript, render blocking CSS, and it's because nowadays websites really do require those types of elements to have a visual design. There's a lot of things online nowadays. I get kind of irritated with what some folks think is desirable. A lot of people want like slideshows, and they want different image effects and stuff on the page, and all that stuff
Or
seems really,
videos,
yeah,
how like a header video that might be in a, that is not
exactly.
necessarily an embed, but it might be a, essentially a video loading.
Yeah, in the hero image, kind of, they show these video
Sure.
hero images, and all that stuff is really attractive, and I mean, it's kind of stuff that you think, wow, that looks great,
Yep.
but really, when you get down to it, I think what I tell my clients is you need to really balance the aesthetics versus function. And there's been a
Sure.
lot of research on user experience and conversion rate optimization. And you'd be surprised that a lot of this stuff that is quote unquote flashy or attractive doesn't really help the business sell more. It doesn't really help the business make more
Yep.
money. There's a lot of websites out there that look horrible and make a lot of money. Craigslist is a great example. eBay is a great example. I mean, there's a lot of websites out there that just are not very attractive visually, but function really well and end up making a lot of money for the people that own them. So I think there should be a good balance between aesthetics and then also function. And if part of that function landscape should be speed. That should be part of what you've focused on and concerned about. With
Yep.
is the website working right? So it's a good balance. I feel like between the two, in my opinion. Um,
Yes, and it has to obviously, we have to. In the past couple of years, we've seen a very big shift, and from desktop and people using desktop and laptops to mobile, and so basically a lot of, comes down to just about everybody, especially in, I'm rural part of Texas, and frankly, 10 years ago, most of the people living around me in different areas, my neighbors, they really didn't have. They had flip phones, and they didn't really have things like an iPhone and a Samsung Galaxy
uh-huh.
S10 or anything. And now we all have phones, we all have tablets, and everybody is now on the internet, especially nowadays. In the past 2 or 3 months, that we're online so much more, and it's because we're using our mobile phones. And so we have to make sure that our phone that when we go on our phone and look at our website, that the website loads fairly quickly, and not necessarily just we're sitting here designing a site and looking at it, it works well on desktop, but we have to actually look and see and pay attention to that mobile version. Google Page Insights gives you the two different scores, one for one for the mobile version and one for the desktop version. And in a lot of cases, the mobile version is so much more important. Um
Yeah,
and obviously, you're going to run, something, especially if uh, you're going to have some kind, images and so forth. And we understand that people are not necessarily using Wi-Fi with their phone, but they're using cellular data. And so we're still, in some areas, the internet speed is not very quickly, and people will not wait that long for your whole website, your web page to load.
yeah, it's absolutely true, and also, it's website speed is really important for mobile, but also so is layout. When you
Sure.
have ideally, what's recommended now is to have what's called a responsive website, which is
Yep.
basically where the site design and layout adapts to the size of the screen. So if the screen is the size of a desktop computer, then it's in a desktop form. But if the screen is the size of a mobile device, then the layout changes to adapt to a mobile device. Or if the screen is the size for a tablet, then the design would be adaptable to a tablet device.
Sure.
That's kind of like the standard practice. But what's interesting enough, what I've noticed is that like a lot of sites, even for desktop, a lot of sites just don't do a great job with layout because there's situations where content is pushed way down below the fold. And the fold is like that imaginary line on your page where it's below the scroll section of the screen. So
Yep.
if you have to scroll down to see content on any device, that's not a great user experience. And if you have to scroll down on a desktop to see content, then you're absolutely gonna have to scroll down on a mobile device because the mobile device automatically pushes content down further. So really kind of think about that as well because that's kind of a parallel conversation to have along with page speed is that you
Gotcha.
have both you know mobile versions of the site and desktop. The worst thing you want is to have a mobile version that not only takes forever to load, but then once it's loaded, you have to scroll 5 screens down to find what you're looking for. You're not going to retain that visitor if you have that type of experience. So that's a good parallel conversation to have along with the site speed is the mobile layout of the site, and that's important for Google because Google does do what they call mobile first indexing now, which is where they crawl the site and index it using their mobile crawler first,
Sure.
which is like duplicating or emulating a mobile device for the purposes of SEO. They want to make sure that your site is decent on a mobile device before they serve it up within mobile results.
Sure.
Um, and so that's a critical aspect of it as well.
So,
Um,
are there any? We're talking WordPress. So, are there any templates or themes or essentially mobile responsive ones that are fast, or frameworks that you recommend
yeah.
starting out with
So there are
on a site?
Yeah, so there are two that I
Okay.
like. First one, it's a free one, and it's called the Bootstrap Starter Theme, and it's
Okay.
basically it's basically a Bootstrap WordPress theme. And for those that have never heard of Bootstrap, Bootstrap is uh, a code framework developed by Twitter,
Okay.
and it's a really great code framework that's easily You can easily kind of build really cool sites with Bootstrap, and it's a Bootstrap starter theme, um, and it's not pretty. Starting out, it's not going to be a really great looking site. It does come with, I
Sure.
think, around a dozen different like skins or different looks
Okay.
that you can apply to it,
Yep.
and you can easily apply those looks inside the theme options after you install the theme. But
Sure.
but basically, it's a very fast theme. If you know anything about web engineering, you probably understand that Twitter has done a phenomenal job with its own web optimization. I mean, I'm
Sure.
I'm always sort of amazed at how fast Twitter's website works when you consider
Mhm.
all that has to happen on every page on Twitter.
Yep.
So it's pretty impressive. And so they've done a really phenomenal job with Bootstrap, and they've done a great job with that. And so it's very fast. So the Bootstrap starter theme on WordPress.org is a great place to look at for a free fast theme to build a site with. And if you're looking for a premium theme, I could recommend Genesis. Genesis used to be owned by a company called Studio Press, and then Studio
Sure.
Press got bought by WPEngine.com,
Yep.
which is a WordPress hosting company. But Studio Press and Genesis, it's a great WordPress theme framework, and they've got probably like 2 dozen child themes. You can pretty much find any type of child theme that you could probably ever need for WordPress, and
Yep.
then take that and modify that child theme to your needs. In my opinion, Genesis is a very fast theme, and you can take Genesis and take it even further and make it even faster with some common sense word plugin additions, but it's
Sure.
already a very fast theme, and a lot of the child themes are also very fast and very elegant. I've always been really impressed with the folks at Studio Press. They've always done a phenomenal job there. So,
Yep.
that's something to look at as well
Yeah.
with Genesis. So but those two are really good ones. And then, just to step back away from those two themes, think more broadly, if
Mhm.
you are wanting to go for a theme, just some good rules of thumb is themes that utilize page builders um,
Sure.
tend to be slower. It's not always the case, and even some of the page builders have noticed this, and they've even kind of done a lot of work to make their sites faster.
Yep.
But some of them still are very slow. And, just because a lot of page builders work by utilizing a lot of JavaScript and CSS. So just consider that, and maybe if you're in the market for using a page builder, just focus
Mhm.
on the ones that maybe have a history of being fast. You can
Okay.
always do your research and say, hey, like I'm looking for this theme. I like this theme. And then you can type into Google like the name of the theme and then like speed, or the name of the theme
Yep.
and like is it fast? Like do your research to see if that specific theme has any existing speed issues that may be known
Sure.
about by others. Um,
Okay.
that's a good way to approach it. But yeah,
Yeah. So we're just about out of time for this
okay.
afternoon. So why don't you tell me a little bit about how to get in touch with you? And I understand you also help provide a service, for if somebody wants or needs basically to speed up their site or just some some consulting for a few hours. How
Yeah,
do we get in touch
sure.
with you?
So yeah, so you guys can visit hallanalysis.com. That's
Okay.
HALLANALISYS, I think. I think that's how you spell analysis. Or no, it's well. Anyways, you know how to spell
Sure.
analysis. Type in
Yep.
hallanalysis.com. You can find me there, and then also you can find me on Twitter at Joe Hall. And yeah, I do provide web page optimization services, and then also
Sure.
SEO consulting and SEO audits. I'd be happy to work with your business, or even if there's any other SEOs out there. I love working alongside other really smart SEOs. So I'd
Okay.
be happy to talk to anyone that's interested.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks, Joe. This has been the Digital Marketing with Bill Hartzer podcast for May 21st, 2020. Thanks again for visiting with me this afternoon. Joe Hall from Hall Analysis. Thanks again, Joe.
Thanks a lot, Bill. You have a good one.